And the media mouthpiece of Egyptian government, they keep saying, Robert, that this selling assets is a normal thing in the world. And you can see the Qatari and United Arab Emirates, they are buying assets in the United Kingdom and other European countries. And this is an economic strategy, and there is nothing wrong with the Egyptian government to selling assets. Do you agree with that?
I think there are a couple of reactions to that. One is that the assets wholly owned by, let's say, the Qataris or the Saudis or the Emiratis are, for the most part, football teams. And so is there any problem with the Qataris owning a football team in the UK? Not on economic grounds, although you could say the macro effect of Gulf money going into European football teams has been to inflate the costs to the fans of actually attending the games and sort of distorted that whole economy. But that's another argument. And I think, okay, you can say, well, it's not so damaging that a prominent sports team, whether in the UK or Paris or wherever, is bought by Gulf money. Now, as far as their investments in productive enterprises are concerned, these are not in almost entirely then purchases of entire companies in which they take shares. They are, in a sense, silent investors in those companies. They are not bringing anything other than capital to them, and they are involved in them overwhelmingly simply for returns on capital. They are not involved in them for the upgrading technological, managerial, or in any other ways of those firms. It's a hands-off management. They are a silent partner. Now, in Egypt, on the other hand, you don't have a developed economy. You do not have Siemens and the pharmaceutical giants of Switzerland and the UK and Germany and so on. So capital to develop Egypt has to be more than a silent partner. It has to be associated with access to markets, with an infusion of technological and managerial skills, and so on. So simply selling assets is running down capital over the long haul to get immediate currency in the short term. And so it's counterproductive to development over time.
Okay, and Sisi rhetoric, Robert, is based on the leading theory that, like much of the world, Egypt was hit hard by the COVID and Russia's war in Ukraine. So do you think Sisi is just a victim who should not hold accountable for this economic crisis?
No, the whole world has had to deal with COVID and the war in the Ukraine. Some countries have dealt with it better than others. Some have come out of it quite well, as a matter of fact. To some extent, Egypt was well placed. Yes, it's heavily dependent upon food imports, so that has been negative. But on the other hand, it has driven up hydrocarbon prices, and it has led to a significant increase in traffic through the Suez Canal. So you could say that had Egypt not dug itself into such a deep hole to start with, and continues to follow policies that are not really enabling it to get out of that hole, that the impacts, the negative sides of the two crises you mentioned is much greater, and the ability to take advantage of the positive sides has not been developed. And so, yes, we continue to hear about development along the Suez Canal, and currently, as you're no doubt aware, there is considerable controversy over essentially privatizing some functions, at least, of the Suez Canal Authority. This may or may not be a good thing. It's good that Egypt is focused on the canal, which is a vital waterway, but the failure to articulate a clear policy and the objectives for the canal and the privatization of at least parts of it then leads to uncertainties on the part both of investors and on the part of the Egyptian people. And so as is typically the case, because the government doesn't really want to reveal exactly what it's doing and why it's doing it, it creates suspicions and opposition. And so I think had it been more open in these regards, such as with regard to the Suez Canal, then it could have adjusted much more effectively to the two crises that are there. And I'll just end by saying the mismanagement of the agricultural sector has been profound since Nasser's time. It is not a new thing. The Egyptian agricultural sector is so much more capable of producing goods for export and generating revenue and generating jobs and generating food for its own people. But the mismanagement of it by the state is a constant feature of the last 70 years. This government has done nothing to affect that. It has mismanaged it even worse than the preceding one. And that's one of the reasons why the war in the Ukraine has been so devastating, because Egypt's agricultural sector is underperforming quite dramatically. Had it done better, then the impact would have been necessarily much less.